Hi everybody, thanks for taking the time to take a look at this video. If you're like me and you like kinetic splitters but you don't really want to pay the full price for a large one, this may be an alternative. And additionally, this talks about the two-stroke gas version of what I'm going to call a mini kinetic log splitter. One of the questions you might ask is, why do I have one of each? And I actually did not intend to buy two of these, but I wound up with two of them. Originally, I wanted to stay electric, and that was primarily due to being able to use the unit indoors if I had to. And I had the same philosophy about chainsaws early on, and I bought an electric corded chainsaw and found that I used it once. And so I haven't learned after all these years, and I keep going back to I might be having to split wood inside someday, and it would be nice to have an electric unit of some sort. And incidentally, Ryobi or Ryobi, whatever the correct pronunciation of that company is, they do make a battery powered version of this, and a little bit more expensive than this one, but if you have the equipment or the batteries for that brand, or the Hart brand, which is apparently similar, then that may be appealing to you. The problem I ended up with this one is I not only wanted to run it inside, but I wanted to run it outside too, but then still be mobile, which means then you're going to need a generator or some other way of powering this. And the original plan was to use a inverter off of a tractor battery and then make this unit mobile. Well, that didn't happen because being able to start that electric motor with a power inverter that runs off of 12-volt batteries proved not practical. So here's the big test. Will this thing fire up? And the answer is no. Even if I hold down the start button. In fact, it tripped the inverter off. Well, I didn't give up yet on the inverter option to run the log splitter, but we'll take a look at some numbers and see that this is probably not the best option for a number of reasons. Number one is this is the Harbor Freight 3000 watt pure sine wave inverter, and that has a list price of $600, which is not much less than the log splitter that comes with the gas engine. So it couldn't start the motor. It almost could, but it wouldn't. And so, if a little quick thing about AC motors, single phase are very inefficient. They take a lot of starting power, and so just for a short duration. And then when you couple that to a system that stores energy in flywheels with no way of offloading that, it's very difficult to start. And to run that out a little further, most likely you cannot start that motor even by itself, even if it was disconnected, based on some experience in other YouTube videos I saw. And by the way, I'll link a video that Torque Chest channel did on using inverters to run motors, and I saw that after I bought this one, but they have some good information on kind of the realities of trying to start AC motors off of inverters and what you need. It's pretty hard to do. So, and even if you could, we'll take some readings here, see what the no load power is that's being drawn. But even if you could get it started, a lot of the alternators on tractors and things just can't produce enough power, at least the smaller tractors, to even just keep this thing running, let alone split wood for say an hour or two. You're going to end up depleting the batteries to a point that's not going to be usable. And so once I found that out, then the gas powered version then looked much more appealing, although I'll lose the potential then to run this indoors, of course, which I guess since I have this one now, I can use this indoors, but it certainly wasn't my plan to wind up with two of these, and I'm not going to send it back because the shipping cost is going to be prohibitive. But one of the first things you guys might not like about these, and I'm right with you, is they're essentially almost right on the ground, which means you're going to be bending over to pick up your logs and put them on there, then picking up the split logs to put them wherever their final or their next location is going to be. And that's a big inconvenience. They have other smaller versions or similarly small versions of these that are on stands, which helps, but and you could easily add a stand here, of course, too, to get that to that height. But that's kind of one of the first drawbacks that would probably tend to keep people away from these. And we'll pop the cover off here. I haven't been in underneath the cover yet, so we're going to take a look at that in a minute. But one of the things I've been seeing in some of the reviews, a little bit of research I did, some of the people were complaining that this cannot handle a 20-inch log, or at least some versions of this can't. And I say they're always pertaining to the electric motor. So apparently they do make an electric motor one that claims to be 20-inch on the stickers, like this one, but it actually isn't 20 inches. And it does say that in the manual. It says 18. And if you measure this, it is indeed just over 18, about 18 and a quarter or so inches. And that's a problem for people because, and it is for me too, because I like to, the wood stove I have can accept up to 24 inches, so that makes this less desirable to have these shorter pieces. And because the way kinetic splitters work, it's my opinion that you really don't even want to put a 18-inch log in here, because when you're right up against the wedge and the pusher plate, let's call that, I don't know if these terms are correct, bear with me, when you go to engage the rack into the pinion, you can what's called tip loading the gears. So the teeth or the gears, whatever you want to call them, when you engage those under load, you tip load them. You put all the load on the very tip, and that creates a high bending force on the teeth, and you can snap them off. And I've had problems with earlier kinetic splitters I had earlier, where I broke teeth, bent the racks, and it quickly makes these unusable. So that's one of the big drawbacks on kinetic splitters. But the kinetic splitter that I put the diesel engine on, I haven't been able to break that one yet. And one of the reasons is probably because it's a little bit slower. It's not quite as fast. So I would say, you know, if at all possible, run these slower. In this case, you can't. It's a fixed speed, but hopefully it's low enough that the longevity of this is better than what it could be. But again, so you have an 18-inch span between here, a little over that, and realistically, I wouldn't recommend putting any more in a 16-inch log. And I get cutting logs exactly 16 inches or less, or you know, you want to try and get it to 16 inches. Not always easy to do, so you're going to get the 17s, you're going to get the 18s, and you're going to have a tendency to put them in there, and that's going to increase the likelihood of causing a problem with that rack. This unit claims to be 20 inch, and according to the manual it's 20 and a quarter. And it actually is. It's actually a little over, it's almost 20 and 3/4. So that helps fix that. So I don't know if that was a result of just feedback from reviews or what, but that answers probably a question most people had in mind. And I can't guarantee that everyone that's electric is going to be 18, and I don't know that everyone that says 20 is going to be actually 20. But the nice thing about this, it's only a couple inches longer, but it does allow you to get to at least 18. And I wouldn't try a 20 in there, or I wouldn't recommend trying it. I probably will try it once I get one, but I'll be taking my chances. And that brings up another point. Even though I have two of these, the thought is, well, if I wreck that rack, I can just put that one in there, and I believe that will still work, but it's gonna not come out quite as far. And I saw some other videos on YouTube where it looked like the rack was not extending as far, and so this one, you know, there's probably 4 or 5 inches in there. Let's see if we can get it out to about right here. Let's measure that to the wedge. Oh, okay, so that's actually closer than what I thought it was. So about 3.5 inches. This one actually locks into place, and you can see it is getting closer. So it's only maybe an inch and a half, a little bit less than that. So this one does extend farther. And I'm kind of wondering, maybe these racks are the same length, but it seems like that one's still a little bit longer. But I'm not too worried about that, because once you get generally if it's a log that plays nice, you don't need to go all the way to the end to get it to split anyway. A lot of times as soon as you break them, you can either pull them apart by hand the rest of the way, or definitely by the time the rack gets down to 3 or 4 inches away, it should be split. Get into issues if you have knots down here, and then of course then you run into problems with your rack too, because as your rack's extended out here, there's a potential to have that bend. The farther away it gets from the pinion too is something else to keep in mind. And while I'm seeing it and I have the rack out, they do grease the rack on both of these. I've noticed that, so that's good, and that's something I would recommend you do if you have a kinetic splitter, is make sure you grease the rack. Let's see, let's talk about this one. Comes with a couple different manuals, or well, they're definitely different. Comes with one for the engine, and then the manual for the actual splitter. Now what I found on this one is it seems to make a lot of, or almost all references are to a hydraulic operated unit versus kinetic, so I'm not sure what happened there. They show a picture of a kinetic, but in the literature it talks about adding hydraulic fluid and a lot of things that are associated with a hydraulic splitter, almost nothing kinetic. So I thought that was, I guess, not unusual considering the origin, but in general it seems like this Chinese stuff seems to be getting a little bit better with manuals as far as legibility and sensibility, but to be that far off seems a little bit unusual. And then you got a couple more tools for the gas engine, for the spark plug, and I don't even know what the Allen wrenches or the Phillips is for, maybe adjusting the jets on the carb if they're adjustable. And it says it actually has a Walbro carb too, Chinese Walbro. Yeah, they seem to like that Walbro stuff, especially with the chainsaws too. But that wouldn't hold my hopes up to that high, that it would be the same or equal quality as a Walbro, but I guess it makes you feel good. That being said, these engines that are of this similar construction and size, I don't know what size these typically come in. I've seen them 49 and I think the 63 or 72. They're kind of all the same design. And even the chainsaws now, the Chinese chainsaws, you know, I know there's a lot of bad rep the Chinese have accumulated over the years, but in my opinion they're starting to dial these things in, and honestly I haven't had any problems with these things just running right out of the box. I haven't had to adjust the jets, so I don't even know if they're even adjustable. I would assume there's something somewhere. Here's I think what seems to be a jet of some sort, I don't know, but hadn't had to touch it, and it just seems to start and run great. It doesn't stall or anything for a two-stroke engine. It's I'm impressed for what the price of these are and what you get. Now longevity, we'll see, but in my case most of the issues that end up being a problem are from the fuel sitting too long in it and causing a problem with the carburetor, which is no fault of the machines. One piece of information that's always good to know is how much these flywheels way, because when you buy a kinetic, usually they tout the weight of the flywheels, and the bigger units I've seen claim to have 75-pound flywheels, and I think I've heard 50s and 40s. So I pulled this one off of here. It is keyed. It does have a lock ring on, and it also has a 4mm Allen screw in it. And it does not weigh very much at all compared to the bigger ones, obviously. In fact, I had a hard time getting a scale that would work on it. And you guys probably can't read that, and I'm surprised how dim that is. But it is LED and we are outside, but that's reading 13.8 pounds. So you'll have two of those, so pretty light by kinetic splitter standards. But the diameters are smaller, and in theory you could turn them a little bit faster maybe, and we're going to check that next. But the predominant factor in the energy a flywheel holds is its speed versus mass. They're both important, but the speed of it, or angular velocity, is the dominating factor. It's a squared factor. So you can make up some loss of mass by spinning it faster, but of course then you run into grenading the wheel too, so got to balance that. We'll get that back on and then take a speed check on both of these units and compare how they run. The other thing I wanted to mention while I'm in here is these appear to be non-greasable bearings. I can't see them very well, but they look like they have seals on them, so they're ball bearings and permanently greased, which should be able to run quite a while in theory, but who knows. The pinion is much wider than I anticipated it to be versus how thin the rack is. It looks like it fit about three widths of rack in there, and some of that's for any variation in the rack, of course, but it seems like it's a little bit much. Other than that, it looks pretty straightforward as far as the linkage goes. Again, not seeing any Zerk fittings or whatever. Not sure what's going on here with, I guess that's some sort of wire lock that prevents you from adjusting this. Most of the linkage on kinetic splitters it's sensitive where you're going to position the handle, because it determines the engagement of the rack and pinion. That's a critical dimension, and apparently that's their way of keeping people from adjusting it, maybe. I don't know, so that's a new one to me, but anyway, that's kind of what it looks like inside. Before we get into checking the speed on both of these units, I did verify that the flywheel on that machine, the electric one, is the same as the one on the two-stroke gas, which is not surprising. Or at least I didn't take it off and weigh it, but if it's not the same, it's not off by very much. The other thing I wanted to mention about how these are set up, while the electric has a pulley and belt that's direct drive, the gasoline version of this has a clutch in it, which is nice, since you can then vary the speed of the unit. And sometimes you find that, and I would recommend, don't run this thing on full speed unless you really have to. A lot of times these logs will split at a much lower value than what you might think, and it just reduces the chance of damaging your rack and pinion if you do happen to get something in there that's not going to budge, like a Y or some knots in a log that just don't go. So there's no use pushing this thing to its limit, only to jeopardize the rack and pinion. And the controls are pretty simple. Just got an external on-off switch, which is, I don't really like that. I think that's going to get broken over time. I'd actually prefer it to be somewhere buried on the side of the engine, somewhere out of the way. It kind of seems like it's out there. And then the your speed, engine speed here, hooked up to the carburetor, of course. And so we'll get this started up and let it warm up a couple minutes, and then we'll start taking some readings and see. But I had this running, I think it was a couple days ago, and yeah, I'm surprised how well these start and run. And just incidentally, we'll be using this digital tach on one of the flywheels to check the output speed, which was what we're interested in, and kind of go from there. So we got our choke on. I don't recommend running these without the guards, and normally I wouldn't run it without the guards, but in order to do this test, it just makes it a little bit easier, and we'll take some extra precautions, make sure we're not on the side where we can get appendages and things caught into that flywheel. In addition to measuring the speed, we'll take a look at how much the no load watts are that the motor's pulling when it's running. So a nice thing about this, pretty quiet. You can hear me talk, hopefully. So we're running around 640, 650 watts in that general vicinity. Looks like it's coming down a little bit now. So yeah, somewhere between 600 and 650, plan on no load speed. Let's go ahead and get our speed of the flywheel. Oddly, the amps are almost the same as the speed of the flywheel, about 614 RPM. In my experience with the larger kinetics, they're running, at least the two that I worked on, they're running around the 350, 400, maybe 450 RPM on the flywheels. They're the heavier 75-pound wheels, so this one makes up with that with some speed. And now you guys know the weight of the flywheel times 2, of course. I hope you guys found something useful in that video, a couple measurements that can help maybe make a decision, or at least see the difference between the gas and the electric for what your purposes are. If you saw some of my earlier videos, you might be wondering, are you going to put a diesel engine on this one and replace the gasoline engine? And as tempting as that is, I'm also a big believer in, if it isn't broke, don't fix it. And this engine seems to be just fine, and so that when that day comes, I'll consider that. But I may actually repower the electric one just to be able to take that outside where I'm going to be doing most of my wood cutting, so we'll see. But the diesel engine, of course, is quite a bit heavier. The footprint's a lot bigger than the gas version of a 2-stroke, so I doubt it's just going to be a bolt on and go. But it would be tempting just to get rid of some of those fuel related issues that are typically associated with the gasoline engines. So we'll see, but we'll play with it for a little while, see how the reliability is, and if it justifies it, we'll consider going to the diesel engine. Other than that, if you guys have any other questions, post them below and I'll try and answer them to the best of my ability. I can go out and take more measurements or just answer general questions. But look forward to another video with these and using them, or at least the one, and as I gain more experience I can share the knowledge I've learned with you guys. So thanks for watching, and we'll catch you again soon.